Um, Great. All right. Well, so I guess we'll get started. So, this podcast started with me really wanting to find other women who were diagnosed in adulthood with ADHD. But I had so many different guests who came to their ADHD. A lot of women came to it through their children, a lot of them myself. I was gently nudged by my therapist for years that I might have it and before I really looked into it. Um, but when we spoke, I wasn't even sure. I know you've worked with families a lot, but I wasn't even sure if you had ever been formally diagnosed or what your journey was. So, but I know that you have sort of come to neurodiversity through your child, right? Your daughter?
Through my daughter, but then also my own experiences. So the experiences that I had with her were because of how I am. So I knew how to treat her and have her kind of excel, a little more than maybe she would have with a different parent because of my own sensitivities, and my own way of being. Like I don't like eye contact, and I don't like sounds, and certain things like that. So, but she was as an infant, she was like times 1,000
Mhm.
for everything. I don't know how I was as an infant, but I had parents who didn't allow for, much. Um, Other than my dad said, yes, you were a very strange child. is how my dad described it. He said, you were always different. And I was like, well, yeah, I know. And but yeah, so that it's just me. She has a lot of traits that are like mine. And so never formally diagnosed. It's more I'm a therapist, and I'm like the reason that I even was attracted to psychology in the first place is because I was learning all about me. So as I was moving along, so I was like, oh, oh, this is interesting. This helped me. And then after a while, I think I just became really good at what I did because to me, everything I did felt like common sense. So to me, it was like, well, if a person has a struggle here, then this is what you do. Like you're always looking for the solution and how to relate in a way that's going to bring out the best of another person. That's just kind of like naturally how I function. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I know that's something I talk about with my guests too, because my experience since my diagnosis, I was just diagnosed last year, so it hasn't been that long. But I think for me, the biggest shift has been rather than immediately thinking, what's wrong with me? I'm lazy or I'm crazy or I'm stupid, or like all of the ways in which we just immediately think that we are the wrong element in the room. It's changing that self-talk and really kind of saying, okay, I'm reaching a barrier. So how do I then, what do I do? What do I need to change in my environment that's going to help me, as opposed to always immediately just sort of shutting down. That's been such, I feel like in some ways, really dealing with this diagnosis, dealing with neurodivergence at all is really, yeah, about the fact that there's no shame, there's no guilt. There's just like, okay, this is how I am different. I need different um accommodations, and like when you say it out loud it feels so obvious, like why wouldn't I have thought that my whole life? But I think like so many of us, this diagnosis is such a revelation because we weren't thinking that ever. Like we were always thinking, oh God, what is wrong with me that I can't do X, Y, and Z? So I don't think it's very common at all that you would grow up thinking, you know, I have this barrier. And, maybe for a lot of people it is. But I think one thing with ADHD that so many of us have in common when we're diagnosed in adulthood is feeling like we were the problem all along.
That's what I went through throughout my 20s and a big portion of my 30s. And at a certain, like in my 30s, I made a decision that I was really, really, really at the end of being miserable, all of the time. And so then after that point, I had to try to start to figure it out. Now, just to kind of give some background so that, people aren't like, oh, she's, just some poser or whatever, right? When I would become overwhelmed, okay, my primary go-to would be to cover my eyes, and usually it'd be like I'd almost shrink into this little hellish little world. And I would close my eyes and kind of bend over and tell by the body that I was just closed, trying to shut everything I possibly could out. And even though people, most of the time, it's interesting because they'll tell me, oh, we wouldn't think that at all, right? About you. There's a lot that I go through. So I carry with me a high level of anxiety. This is all the time. This is every day. This is I'm overwhelmed by most things, but I just understand that I'm overwhelmed by most things, so I keep moving anyway. But
Hmm.
that's been my journey. Like even just today, like today is one of those days where I'm just kind of holding, and it depends because I'm very sensitive. So what I expose myself to, so that actually makes a big difference for me anyway, because I kind of take in everything, kind of the things around me. And so if I'm around like more a good amount of anxiety from other people and that kind of thing, then I'll just kind of be holding it sometimes, right? It's very interesting because for me, like in the work that I do, the people that I work with, depressed, anxious, all those kind of things. And it's interesting because when I'm at work, when I have to be on, then it's almost like I have this, like, because it's the space and place that I'm supposed to do that, it's like I have this like barrier, and I'm able to kind of hold everything in that, in space that's just outside of me, right? And so it makes everything okay. But then it also gives me the ability to like what I feel like, what I call like, it kind of gives me like the superpower to actually do the healing thing. I'm feeling like, okay, you know how you need a little bit of the, and I don't mean to call it a virus, but you need a little bit of the whatever the negative thing is in order to create the healing, the healing piece. I feel like I'm able to kind of soak that in, hold it, create the like vaccine or whatever, and then and then inject it back, so in the form of a healing substance.
Oh my God, I love that analogy. That's great.
It's really weird, right?
I mean, no, it makes sense that anyone who would go into psychotherapy probably has is fascinated by their own brain and probably has some of their own issues to work out, right?
Yes.
That's we do what we need most, right? Um, so how I'm always fascinated by, women who I interview who have done, so much academically, right? And so because for me, had a dismal academic career. I made it. I graduated with my bachelor's like by the skin of my teeth, and I've always kind of held that, taken that with me. And now I look back, thanks to with this new lens, and I'm just like, oh, all of these ways in which my ADHD did not serve me in school. But how did you feel like it? Looking back at your academic performance and your advanced degrees, like how do you feel like you succeeded with a neurodivergence?
I feel like it was just I have kind of a weird, my history is kind of weird. Okay. So I have like this extreme, like to an excess. Um, it's like a push to to try to be successful. Like there's something behind it. And it's based in my history because I kind of came up in just, it was a high degree of poverty, really not much, just kind of hungry sometimes and homeless sometimes, and those kind of things. So what it kind of stimulated in me, and this doesn't happen for everyone, but for me personally, I'm consistently trying to push past whatever's going on with me to make sure that I'm able to, and I think it's almost like a survival thing for me. I don't ever want like for my kids to be hungry, or I don't ever want, so then it just kind of gives me this, it's a weird push, even if I have to push through it in tears and and craziness. And because a lot of it was in craziness, this is like trying to write papers, and soaking the papers in tears because it's just hard to stay, keep that focus and those kind of things. So I don't know, I feel like it's like a weird combination of, I want to make sure that I stay as far away from what I experienced in my history as possible. And I was a teen mom, so I've had my son, he's 29 now. Huh. So old, but
You
but
don't even look 29.
like, oh, you know what? Thank you. I'm super excited about it. Anyway. Anyway, he just left, and but I have my yeah, he's 29, and I would say that he was like my motivation for almost everything, because when I looked at him, I decided that he would not grow up anything like I had.
Mhm.
So like it gave me a different kind of push.
Yeah, no, that is a topic we talk about a lot, or I talk about a lot with my guests in terms of just like feeling like you have a lot to prove, right? And feeling like, very competitive, and also feeling like there's a lot of that additional pressure to really kind of show that you belong in the room. And so as a woman, I experience that. As a Black woman, you have the additional sense that you're always trying to you always come up against that. Basically, you always have that sense of like, I have to prove myself to these people who are going to judge me, before I've even opened my mouth, right? And so
I'm so excited that you brought that up. I was I am, because that could be kind of tough to talk about sometimes too. But yeah, it is because as a woman, there are certain assumptions that are made about us as women, and as a Black woman, there are certain extra assumptions that are made. you
exactly.
know,
And yeah,
so yeah,
and so and that's what I love about the kind of ADHD community and the neurodivergent community, is I feel like there's some of the wisest voices in this community that I've found are coming from Black women because of that unique experience, right? And it's so wonderful because they're, it's just lovely to be in a space where the conversation is being led by Black women, as opposed to every other space where white men won't shut up. And so I do like, it is a topic I love to bring up, and I hope, I never know if I'm stepping on toes or whatever, but I'm just like, it
nope, not
fascinates me
these toes.
because it is like, it's that idea that, so many of us had to experience that, like the pressure to behave, and like why boys are diagnosed and girls aren't. Well, because girls are have to keep quiet and have to behave and have to be liked, and all of those things that like I relate to as a woman, and then it's just amplified when you're a woman of color. Absolutely. So
Yeah,
it just, it hurts
I
my brain when
spent
I think about it.
I spent my childhood, teenagehood, all that portion, even in my 20s, very very misunderstood, very angry, because I
Mm,
really didn't understand. I didn't understand quite a few things. My sister was like this, really calm, um, very liked, person that got along with everybody. And I was at the other end of that, where I was the one that nobody liked and that everybody was kind of afraid of, and that was too honest and I think considered rude most of the time. And I think still now I tend towards being very honest, and people don't always like that. So I don't know how I get away with a lot as a therapist, and I think it's maybe because I'm so effective. But I really tell people the truth, and I'm like, I am not doing you a favor if I don't tell you the truth, and that's just kind of how I exist. So if you don't like the truth, I'm the wrong person for you.
I had a very similar experience, just in terms of like, I have lost count of how many times I've been dismissed by white men as just like, the angry feminist, right? Oh, you're just angry. And so it's as though that is a reason to dismiss you, right? Where it's like, I have an opinion and I'm expressing my opinion, and so to be dismissed because you're angry, I mean, I think that's something we deal with a lot, in our society, in our culture, and I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, but I think it's like, I can't be any other way. So it's sort of, I feel like there's some solace in the fact that like I have no filter. Like, even if I wanted to kind of be quieter and be in line, I can't even do it anyway. So yeah, I've taken your approach too, which is like, I'm not for everyone. Move along.
Somebody told me yesterday, um, you tell way too much through your eyes. You need to tell your eyes to be quiet.
Ah.
I'm like, you know what? My eyes can't help it. the,
That's a new one. I like that
the
one.
reaction is what it is. Because, sometimes it's just like, I'm just looking at people like, oh my goodness, what you're saying is not like, for me, especially if it's like not solution based, and they're like in a space where we're supposed to be trying to help, with progress in
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
area. I'm just like, oh my goodness, can we move into some discussion that's actually going to be helpful?
That's funny. I have the worst poker face when it comes to that. And and I think I've often, as I try to as I try to figure out if I'm an extrovert or an introvert, because I really related to what you were talking about being on stage, right? Like you really can like find your zone and be on in the moment. And I've always loved that. I've always loved theater, and I've always loved kind of public speaking for that reason. And so part of me feels like, well, maybe I am an extrovert, but then there are other times where I'm like, no, I need a lot of alone time. I'm really an introvert. And I also like, I I can't, like, if I don't like somebody, it is so obvious in my face that I don't like you. And
Yes.
so often I will like avoid people, I will avoid those situations. Some of my in-laws, for instance, like I get really nervous and I get a lot of anxiety when I'm going to be around them because I just know, like, I'm like, my face must show you how unhappy I am right now. Like I cannot pretend to like people. And I'm like, that has to be an ADHD thing. Like we must
Yeah,
have
I think
terrible poker
so.
faces.
I think so. Now, poker faces, that's funny because like I'm weird. So like in real life, right? Real life, I can't hide anything, right? But if I'm playing a role, if I'm like in a role and I have to play that role, I can do that. Like when I have to be on, like it could be I could just finish just full on crying or whatever and come right on the camera and on. It's
Mm,
so weird. And
yeah.
go in with clients, and because I struggle with depression, so sometimes it's just I don't want to do anything. So then driving to the office, I'm like, I don't want to listen to people talk. and, and so I'm crying on the way. Then I get there, but it's weird because it's like, and I feel like it's like a part of my gifting allows room for me to be able to like really operate in that gift when I'm kind of called on to do it.
Mhm.
So if I were just sitting at home, maybe I'm not feeling the greatest. But if I'm out there and I'm sharing a message, then it's fine. Like in that moment, it really is like it's like really fine. It's weird the separation that I have, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I mean, so many of us relate to and talk about masking, right? And this idea that like we come across as being very together and being very accomplished. And yeah, Melon, here you are, you're talking about struggling with depression, but you're also this one incredibly, powerful speaker, and you've written all these books, and like, to the untrained eye, you are very, very successful. And so then and so I think a lot of us have that, like, it can be very isolating, it can be very lonely when we realize that like the true version of us is so different from what other people are seeing. And then I also find it crazy that people will say like, oh, you can't possibly have ADHD because you do so well. you know?
Exactly. Oh my goodness. It people like all of my clients, they just know me. Like man, my brain, like as far as holding things, it just doesn't operate, in that way. I can say, oh, I'm going to do this thing right here. Pick up my phone, open it. I will completely forget what it was I opened my phone for. So much so that now my husband he knows I'm gonna do it. So before he didn't believe me, he's like, are you serious? Are you okay? Right? And I explained to him, these are my challenges. So, don't be surprised. I have them a whole, and I always tell people I'm a gumbo of stuff. So I got food issues over here, some stuff that's based in trauma over here, and so just so I even gave him seriously. I gave him a 3x5 card when I realized we were going to be close. I gave him a 3x5 card, like explaining what my different pieces look like. This is what this looks like, and this is what you do on the other side. And
Oh,
he
that's
kept that.
brilliant.
Yeah, he kept it for. I didn't know. Like I almost cried. He showed 10 years. 10 years after I gave this card to him, he still had it in his wallet, and he would still come back and refer to it. And he
That's so
showed me, said,
romantic.
"Yeah." He said, "You told me." I said, "Because I'm like I'm so proud of you for being able to deal with a person like me, because I know I'm not easy, right?" And he's like, "You told me how," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You gave me a card. You gave me like an information card, or right, like a little guide on you, right?"
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, "What?" And first of all, I didn't remember doing it. That's the bad part. But it was in my handwriting. But when I saw that, and I was like, how long ago did it? He said when we first got together, and I was like, this was so smart. This was so smart of me. And he's like, yeah, it's helped me out with you for years.
That
Okay.
is so smart. I always tell the story about my husband, who I've been with for 20 years now, and is the most amazing partner. But when we first started dating, and I knew that I really loved him, I tried to break up with him because I was like, he's going to discover what a hot mess I am eventually. And then it's going to be so heartbreaking when he dumps me that I'm going to dump him first. And, and I did it on his birthday. It was like we were out for a birthday brunch, and I handed him this long, sappy letter that I wrote about, how it's time for us to part. It said, oh my God, I'm sure he's probably kept that letter too. But he read it and very like sweetly read it, and then looked at me and he was like, "Don't be ridiculous. We're not breaking up." And I was like,
Oh,
"Oh, he wouldn't let me." And I was like, "Thank you." Like now, in 20 years later, I'm like, "God, I'm so glad you didn't let me, and that you saw through that." But it just speaks to that sense of, right, that sense of like, nobody knows that, like, eventually you're going to find out what a hot mess I am. So if only I had thought about the index card. That's brilliant. So wait, you were nodding. Did you try to also do the same thing? Did you try to
I
break up with your
did. I did. I did. I was like, you're too normal. Like, this is not going to be okay for you. I'm trying to warn you ahead of time. And it was funny. Now he was different though, because he had come from a history of a couple of really like bad, sad breakups. He's a super sweetheart. Bad breakups. So when I actually told him, I this is like really scary to me. It's not you, right? It's not you, it's me. You
Hmm.
know, that whole talk. And
Yeah.
you just don't understand, right? He was so baffled. He was looking at me like, what are you talking about? And then I'm like, you know what? It's for the best, and right. And I drove off, and he was so upset with me. And as I'm driving off, I'm calling my sister and calling my best friend and saying, this is what I did. I'm like, girl, are you crazy? Go find him. Go find him now. Right. You know, they're like, they're like, this is the first time we've ever seen you happy. What, are you allergic to being happy? And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, kind of.
So, maybe. No, and so I went back, and when I found him, I had to do a little bit of work, because he was like, and then he just looked at me. He's like, we promised not to do this. We promised to stay friends. If we decided that this whole dating thing didn't work out, we were friends for like 3 years before we started to date. He said, we made a deal and you broke that deal. And I was like, I was
Oh.
just really scared. You just don't understand. I don't feel like it makes sense for you to want to be with me, right? And he explained. He said, okay. He said, so next time, just talk to me about it. You're having these very weird thoughts. Just talk to me, because I'm very sensitive, and I can't handle just the random breakup. So I was like, okay.
It sounds like a Showtime movie. It
Yes,
sounds like a
yes,
romantic
yes.
movie.
Our whole life, our
Ah,
our, our whole our whole life is a big Showtime. A Lifetime. It's Disney
Lifetime,
Plus.
yeah, sorry. Okay, so let's talk about the Lafaya Way and kind of how you started and the incredible work that you're doing. You work with people of all ages, or do you work mostly with children's or parents, or what do
I
you
always
like? And
fancied myself liking to work with like teenagers, and
ah,
then what ended up happening is, in the work that I do, because I just am a perfectionist, I think, and I have to like be thorough and address the areas that matter. I had to work with the entire unit. So when I had to work with the entire unit, that meant the younger kids, the siblings, the older kids, the older adult or young adult siblings, the parents, the grandparents, teachers, right? So I ended up working with all ages very successfully, because I really just use a tangible approach. Like, I want you to be able to leave from my presence with real tools, things that are actually going to work for
mhm.
our hypersensitive kids. So my focus has always been on the kids, like this is how you treat our kids with whatever it is, ADHD, autism. It does. I'm in the realm of hypersensitivity now,
Right.
where everybody, where no matter what it is that's going on, where they dwell, right? And this is how you keep from making, and not a blaming kind of thing, but making things worse. for a person who's already experiencing challenges, right? This is how you do
Yeah, absolutely. I found my son is going into 5th grade and he has not been formally diagnosed with ADHD. I'm pretty sure he has it. I know he has it, but I also am like really struggling. My husband and I are talking constantly about whether or not to get him diagnosed and whether that will be helpful, or whether we can help him at home organically. Because, like, through learning so much about what the structures that we need and what works and what doesn't work, I find it often a lot easier to advocate um, by just labeling what he needs for his teacher as opposed to saying, my son has ADHD, right? So, like, for instance, he needs to sit at the front of the classroom. If he sits at the back of the classroom, he gets distracted and he often gets a lot of anxiety if other kids are talking to him because he's worried he's going to get in trouble. And so instead of saying, my son needs to sit at the front of the classroom because he has ADHD, I just explain kind of why the logic, like you were saying, the logic behind his needs. And I feel like that's so much easier to advocate that way. But I also don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot by not having this diagnosis yet. We're kind of taking it day by day with him. I'm not sure. So um yeah, I mean, I guess I love the fact that you are working with everybody in the picture, because I think sometimes when you just talk about the label or the diagnosis and not what it entails, you have no idea what that person is hearing, right? Like, when I say I have ADHD, I have no idea what people think I'm saying. Some people think, when I came out and said I had ADHD when I had this diagnosis, there were some people who were saying, like, I'm so sorry, like I had told them I had terminal illness. Right? And I'm like, why are you telling me you're sorry? This is a miracle that I'm learning all of this, right? But it's just telling me how little you understand about what this
well,
is.
I feel like I do strongly, and I have strong opinions, so everybody forgive me. But I do strongly dislike kind of the dehumanizing effect that sometimes labels will have. Like, it's as opposed to now you're dealing with another human being who, like other human beings, have challenges in certain areas, right? There's just more clearly defined and fit into this little, this box here of ADHD, or this box of right now. Even that, those don't even fit neatly, but whatever. They
Mm-hmm.
have enough of those things in the box, right, to meet the criterion for the diagnosis. But yeah, what ends up happening is a lot of misunderstanding. And just I wanted to speak to because you were kind of just wondering if it was working against, maybe working against, what your goals are for your son to not have him formally diagnosed yet. I would say this: given your focus on dealing with what the issues are, you have that problem solving focus. I think that it may or may not become necessary for the diagnosis. The diagnosis is necessary when what? When you need to medicate. The diagnosis is necessary when you need to get formal accommodations through the schools, through IEP 504s. If you're able to get those results that you need without the other things, because medications do what? They take time. People don't get mad at me, okay? Medications take the edge off of the strength of what your challenges are. Okay, they take the edge off, and some people will say it takes even more of the edge off. Right, when we're dealing with psychosis and stuff, then okay, please take your medication. Right, but when you're dealing with other things outside of that aren't as severe, then remember, you're just taking the edge off. There's no magic. It's not a magic wand. It's not going to automatically, make you completely and totally, one great way that you some perfect, like I said, grass greener on the other side kind of experience. It's not going to happen that way. It's just going to help you so that you're able to use the tools that you need to make things happen. But if you're able to use the tools that you need to make the things happen, then your end is to get to the results, right? So, like for my daughter, now people, it doesn't really, for me, kind of doesn't really matter to me what people think, And so for my daughter in particular, I know a lot of things about her sensitivities. I know that she was born as an infant with an aversion to eye contact, noises, voices, things like that, right? So all those things that get in the way of being able to properly bond, right, or being held close, even all those things that get in the way of properly bonding with other people. I understood her challenges, so I worked with her in a different way. I didn't personalize it. This is where my philosophy ended up coming from. Is just my own experiences with her. Is I didn't personalize it. I understood, like, oh baby, you don't want people, all the ugly faces looking at you in your face. I understand completely, right? and so and so it was just almost like turning her out and not allowing other people to judge her for these things. But then we work with her on them. If she does has an aversion to eye contact, then we turn her away for a time when she starts to cringe, turn her away from time, let her regulate, and bring her back slowly, little periods of time. Now you have to spend a long time doing this, back out and then in, right? Until she can stay longer and longer. Then she can stay with me, And then when it came time for the noises and that kind of thing, when she got old enough, I gave her a way to verbalize, a way to respond, where she's like, I don't like that noise, instead of the grab, squeeze, and scream bloody murder, right? She learned to, I don't like that noise. She's 7, she'll be 17. Oh my goodness, I think next week, the 17th, in 2 weeks, whatever. She'll be 17. She's my youngest. She'll be 17. And I didn't find out until 2 years ago when I was writing a blog that she still hates the sound of flushing toilets. That she'll flush and run like she does. She just comes, like, tries to get really long arms, thank goodness, and she'll be trying to get out of the bathroom before it, right? And she still has these, and I know she has sensory sensitivities, but now she deals with them in an entirely different way. Had she gone through her life being judged for those, they would create more anxiety for her, more lack of ability to function in ways that she could, because this is the thing, most of the time it's not that the kids, adults, whatever, can't get there. It's that there's a gap between the ability and them, and people can see that there's ability. Like, I know you have this ability, and so then they judge them for not being activated, within, like being able to use that ability, without understanding that you have to build the bridge first, right? And don't be upset because you have to build the bridge. Just understand there's a gap so that you can help build the dang bridge. Right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. I think there's so many instances in which children are behaving in ways that are, you know, considered inappropriate by the adult, right? And so the adults, their reaction is, what are you doing? Stop it. What's wrong with you? As opposed to trying to understand the what is happening. And it's just, it's so upsetting to think about how that, just gets beaten into kids over and over and over again when they are just really trying to protect themselves, like what I deal with a lot of or work with children and teenagers as well with eating, and I often tell parents, like, binge eating from children is a way that they're self-soothing, right? And so it always comes from a way of helping themselves. And like, so you really need to, rather than think like how this is a terrible behavior and we need to stop it, really trying to say like, they're taking care of themselves in the best way that they know how. So let's just take a moment to be grateful for the fact that they are taking care of themselves.
Right.
Right. And so like really trying to like come at it from a different point of view. And so I think, yeah, it's so important when I didn't even realize how hypersensitive I was, how many sensory issues there are with this neurodivergence that I had just sort of never thought about until I thought, yeah, wait a minute, you're right. I can't brush my teeth and keep my eyes open at the same time, or like things like that, where I was like, yeah, you're right, there's all of these just noises that really bother me. Or motherhood, I mean, newborn babies, like everything about having newborns was just like sensory overload. And
Sensory
uh,
nightmare.
I know, right? It's like, and whenever I talk to a mom with a young child, I just want to give her a hug because I'm like, oh, it was the worst. And I love being a mom, but it was just really, yeah, it's fascinating to me, all of the sensory issues that I had kind of never really acknowledged until looking back through this new lens.
And with the Lafaya way, that's like one of the things that I'm trying so hard to bring out for everyone. That's why I didn't want to get pigeonholed in any one particular little area. 'Cause I don't want all the rest. Sensitivity is sensitivity. Hypersensitivity is hypersensitivity. It doesn't matter what they throw on it, what diagnoses, what the traits are or whatever. If you have it, you have it, right? So then we don't dismiss those kids out there without the dang diagnosis, because that's that happens most often. That bothers me the most. Are the kids that can, especially our little girls, our females, can function at that what looks like that higher level, right? Because there's certain girls are different. Like we desire to be liked. Like we're innately made to want to be close to nurture, right? That kind of thing. And so for the girls, most of the time things are so very hidden. And so all the sensitivities are just kind of like down underneath and they have to hide them, right? Which leads to a lot more binge eating and a lot more things like self-harming behaviors and and things like that. But it's what I want everybody to understand is there's some things that are very similar, crossover, the same-ish, whatever, when you're dealing with hypersensitivity. And that sixth sense, or that I always talk about, which is probably inaccurate, but I don't care. Where I'm talking about like that emotion soaking piece, that unintentional sponging of the feeling energies of other people, that one right there, that's so widely, so hugely missed that oftentimes people will get acting out behaviors from your hypersensitive person because of the way it's just the way that they present to the hypersensitive person. So the hypersensitive person is like drawing all of this negative energy from you and you don't realize it, even though, and especially no, and I'm sorry, this I shouldn't say especially. This tends to be a hidden thing when you're dealing with people who would fancy themselves to be calmer. So on the outside, they speak quietly, they speak calmly, they do all of that, but internally, they are the most anxious thing you could meet, right? And so for hypersensitive people, then, and this is why when you don't like people, you don't like people, by the way. I have to learn this about myself. When I don't like you, I don't like you. You bring to me things that I don't want inside of me. So I don't want to be around you. And so, but then you'll get this dynamic of this emotion soaking piece that it disrupts the ability to respond in non anxious ways for your hypersensitive, sponging person, right? So that's such a big piece that, in the seriously Lafaya way, that's what I find myself primarily addressing is how to decrease that negative effect on the hypersensitive person.
Mhm. Now, I the more I learn about various neurodiversities, the more I think about all of us kind of having this neurotype, and we're all kind of on the same side of the room, right? So I'm like, sometimes I'll read articles about autism and I'm like, yeah, I think I should really look into that. you know and I think like so many of us have various like symptoms of this neurodiversity and OCD or hypersensitivity, but like we're all, it's almost like we're randomly given diagnoses. Like some of us are kind of given the ADHD diagnosis and some of us are given autism. Asperger's is another one where it's like I feel like it's being phased out because it's really just autism, but like I sort of feel like at the end of the day it's almost pretty arbitrary what we're diagnosed with. It's just a matter of like we're all sort of have this neurotype and we're all kind of on the same team, so to speak, right? And it just has manifested itself in different ways based on our childhood and based on whatever traumas we've experienced.
Exactly. Now, and this is my thing. See, when you, it almost sounds cringe worthy. If I were super stuck on words like I used to be, but I'm not super stuck on it, a little bit stuck down. But when you say symptoms, that
Oh, I
word
know.
is so frustrating because now that automatically sets people's minds to think that there's some kind of disorder,
Yeah.
right? Instead of just a different order, right? We're just just made different. We function. We'll be perfectly fine if you would just let us learn how to be the best us we could be and not expect for us to be you, right? It's so frustrating. And that's why I super focus on, I want for everybody out there to start to use the word traits.
Yes,
Let's
thank
just
you.
use traits. Traits, it keeps us from being so sick, right? This is
Yeah.
not a, we don't have diabetes, right? Right? Just symptoms. These are traits. And you're that's why I tell people, nope, never been formally diagnosed because I see myself in anything hypersensitive. OCD, yep, check. ADHD, check. nasty check, right?
Right.
PTSD check, right?
Well, and this is why I get so frustrated when I hear women who have sought an ADHD diagnosis with a medical professional and they're told, no, it's not ADHD, it's just depression and anxiety. And, I think any medical professional who is not willing to see the causal relationship between a life undiagnosed and depression and anxiety, like depression and anxiety, those are symptoms of an undiagnosed life. Like those are not medical, those aren't medical diagnoses on themselves. Like um, I don't know. Anyway, I'm tongue tied, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like it just
they
frustrates
come from
me.
something else, from the experiences, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And so the fact that somebody would say it can't be ADHD, it's got to be, it's trauma or it's depression and anxiety without seeing how fully connected all of this is of like, the accumulation of an entire life of feeling like like you were a square peg in a round hole and all of that feelings that we've grown up with. So I feel like, what would you say to somebody who feels like they um so many of us were worried. Like I was worried when I went to the doctor to get my diagnosis because I felt like when I started looking into ADHD, I felt seen and understood for the first time in my life, and I had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety and PPD and PPA, and I'd been on all sorts of different SSRIs and medications like for my whole adult life and never really felt like anything fit, and never felt like the medication worked because but I also had that fear where I was like, well, if this is what I'm like on medication, imagine how bad I'll be off the medication. And so I never wanted to go off of it. um, but I was so afraid that the doctor was going to say, no, this isn't it, because I felt like this really was something that, I felt so validated by all of the literature and everything I had heard and seen. And I feel like, and thankfully it went really well for me. The minute, I walked in the room with all my paperwork and everything, and she was like, yeah, don't worry, you had me at hello. There was no problem. But so many of us, I think, are afraid of being dismissed by our medical professionals. So like what and so as a result, I often will say, like you did, like I think self-diagnosis is the most important thing. I don't think we need I mean, unless you really want, and unless you want to go for medication, or you feel like in some way you will feel fundamentally validated by getting this diagnosis, I don't think it's necessary at all, to live a very successful and happy life. It's really about understanding yourself. So I guess my question is like, what would you say to somebody who's really struggling with like, do I or don't I, and should I get this diagnosis? And
No, yeah, and I feel like it really is a personal, it's a very personal thing. I really don't have anything against per se someone going out and seeking that, the medical professional's opinion. But if you have done the research yourself and you see yourself in, falling within certain criteria, and you know that the only reason it doesn't show up for others is because you are able to mask it well, then it's okay for you to, even if you don't want to, like, you're not the doc, so okay, if you don't need a formal diagnosis, then you can say to yourself, hey, yep, I definitely have these traits, and I want to learn everything that I can to every coping skill that I can, so that I can deal with the traits that actually plague me or bother me, right? And things like that. Or quite honestly, to put it most simply, if there are things about something about you that you don't like, okay, then that's worth changing because you want to like you. Okay, that's it. And if you are, it's important to you to hear from a medical professional, then go for it and do that. If you feel like there's something going on with you and you don't get the right answer from a medical professional, then I just urge you, go get a second, third opinion, because medical professionals aren't experts, okay, in all areas. Most of the time, it's just they have their one key area that they're an expert in, and maybe they might have a couple of things that they specialize in, but sometimes they're missing it in certain other areas, right? So then you find someone who you are referred by someone else who knows that they know ADHD well, or autism well, or, those kind of things. Or like I said, for me personally, If you can handle just, I recognize myself in this, I understand that I have traits and I'm going to work on improving the things that I don't like within this space, right? But then also celebrating the things that you do like, because there are a lot of positive things about some of these disorders, right? Too. And so a lot of positive aspects, like they give you superpowers in certain areas. Like I'm superpowered at, and I'm very gifted at helping people feel, first of all, understood and validated because I understand their experience so personally well, but then also in helping to heal, when you've been wounded because of how you've been treated out there, and including how you treat yourself, by the way. And so, but that's my superpower, and I wouldn't have it if I didn't have the challenges.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, like you are not the problem. I feel like that was the biggest shift for me right now, in all of this was my self-talk, just being like when it feels like something is too much, you are not the problem. You have to figure out what is the barrier to get you from point A to point B. Which has shifted so much in terms of just shifted my marriage. It shifted my how I parent. It's been overwhelming. um, so now I'd like to ask my guests what if you could rename ADHD to something else that's less problematic and less medicalized or whatever, would you? I know you use trait, so I don't know if you love the term vast, but what would you have another name for it if you could?
Ooh, for ADHD. Huh. Huh. Ooh, I like DFH.
DFH. Okay, what does that stand for?
Differently focused humans.
Oh, perfect, right? It's like that's just the side of the room we're on, right?
And if you can figure out, what works best for us, right? to get the best us out of us, then you're in a good space. Like for my daughter, she can't remember to close her windows in the daytime. So what do? We get her to the best her. She's not going to remember that on her own. I'm going to teach her to do what mommy does. Calendar everything. Make sure an alarm goes off and it goes off 3 or 4 times with the same thing. And then all of a sudden you find yourself successful.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing I love talking about too, which is like how hard we work to come up with accommodations for ourselves too, in those ways in which I have 50 reminders that go off all day long that are some of them are so basic. Like I have to literally be reminded to feed my children because if I'm not reminded, if I don't have an alert, I will forget they exist. So, but at least at least I've found the structure that works for me to feed the poor kids. I mean, obviously they'll probably come to me eventually and but, like I love thinking about all of the ways in which we kind of do build these structures for ourselves to do well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do not have a deficit of anything, so it bothers me that it says attention deficit.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
I
would
like
definitely.
differently focused human. I like that. Let's talk about how people can find you and how they can work with you and support you and what kind of services you offer. If somebody's listening and they said, "Oh my goodness, I need to work with Lafaya," how can they reach out to you and what do you do? What do you do? How do you work with people?
Oh man. Okay, so I have a variety of things that I'm doing right now. I'm actually developing a curriculum who I didn't know that that's what I was doing at first until I started, and then it turned into that. But I basically have taken information from my 3 published books, and I've now created a 12-week curriculum from that for parents, but also have a general curriculum too. Because as I've been moving along, like this is not just for parents. People need to know these things to help themselves out, to work on the job stuff and all that. So I have it in general, and I call it the PEP program. The parenting program is called the PEP program, and the is Parents Empowering Parents. And actually, I might keep PEP for my general and just call it People Empowering People. I like PEP; it's good.
Right?
But
We have
right,
a lot of
and
that.
And so, oh, maybe put an extra E in there so we can be peeps. But anyway, um, I like creating stuff. But
Right.
anyway, um, but yeah, so right now, like right in the middle of kind of building on that curriculum, and I'm talking about its most excellent. I also have I run Q&A, what I call Q&A, the Lafaya way, little sessions where people can come in, ask questions live. I love to answer questions live. I love for people to try to stump me. Come in with your most difficult situations. It's my favorite. And and so I have Q&A the Lafaya way. Also have my YouTube channel. Lots of parenting education, but I'm gonna broaden it out. I'm gonna open it up now to be more general. And you can pull from that parenting piece a lot of good information for yourself and others. It's not just for children, it's relationships in general. I call the Lafayette way is an advanced relational philosophy. So even though my focus has been with parents, it really, and everybody who reads my books, they know this already. They're like, this is not just for, this is not just for parents. This is for life in general. This helped me with my marriage. This helped me at work. This helped me here. Right. And I'm like, I know, but that's like my niche right now. So that's what I say. Right. But it's for everything. So I have my YouTube channel, which helps a lot with hypersensitivity, understanding not just what it is, but how to effectively, tangible way, four step four step formula for how to work through and get to a better space, like build the bridges that you want to that behavior that you're looking for, right? And so I have that, and you can find everything it is that I do on lafayaway.com. Everything's Lafayaway. Lafayaway.com. My website will take you to everything else. My Facebook communities. I'm doing so many different things right now to try to spread the word that it's insane. So lafayaway.com.
I love it. Yeah, there is a wealth of information on your website too. So yeah, I will put links to all of that, but that's great. Um, awesome. So parents empowering parents. And then if you do two E's, you could, be twice exceptional, right?
Oh, 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 we could be people empowering squared people.
Right? I love it. Well, I mean, even just the idea of having like a 3x5 card that explains on the back like how to, in case of emergency, break glass, right? Like that's brilliant. I wish I had, oh god, I'm trying to think of like what would I carry around with me, almost like a business card, but instead it's like a nice sort of explanation of like how to deal with this when this is happening. That's so I love that. Do you give that advice to parents and children
You
to
know what
work
I
that
do?
way?
I give 3x5 cards all the time. So like especially I'm like super into like making sure that you learn how to respond in alignment with your truest intentions. This is so key, so important. And it's like so simple, but we miss it all the time because we're not taught. We're not taught, it's not ingrained to treat yourself how you actually want to be treated. So don't allow the negative thoughts to come in and overtake, and treat those, give form to the negative thoughts. Treat them like you would someone else talking to you that way. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and when you want confident kids, right? And you know you love your children, you know you want them to be like super built up and all that. When you're yelling, when you're talking down, and you're doing that kind of, you're lazy, those kind of things. That is completely and totally against yourself. It's not only against them; it's against your core, like your core goals, right? Because you want a confident kid. So I give people like a way to address behaviors that they don't like, unexpected behaviors. So I give things like the power talk formula on the little 3x5 cards. Hey kid, when you do this thing right here, it causes this reaction that you don't like right here. And I know that's not your intention. So please do it this way right here. We want you to be happy, right? Kind of thing.
Yes.
So then you're actually responding instead of reacting in ways that go against yourself, which is actually what causes you more upset. You are more upset with the fact that you're not being true to yourself when you're saying really unkind things to the ones that you love, including yourself. So, yeah.
Um, yes, absolutely. And that I think we were talking about that with the Facebook Live too, like the different ways in which we experience deprivation in our life, a lot of it comes to just like how we treat ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. And by having so much self-doubt and by having so much self-denial of self, that is in itself a form of deprivation. And then you react and you overcompensate and all of that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I could talk to you for hours, I'm sure.
I know, I know. Let me not spark up. I was like, I just sparked up a whole new conversation for closing it there. Shut up.
No, it's fascinating. And yeah, I love the work you do. And so thank you for sharing some of your own history and your own personal story with me. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah. All right. Great. So thanks again. It was lovely to always love any excuse to chat with you. Maybe I'll have you on again and for just another topic. If you're ever
I
working
would
on
love
anything, let me
to.
know.
No, we can do it. We can break down the four core. I love doing that. I always do it. I overdo it all the time. So I could do like spend an hour on like just one of the core concepts each. Like I
I
could
know.
spend an hour on
Oh, I know. I
each.
would love that. Okay, well, it's a, I was actually thinking of, I've got an online community that's growing from the podcast where I'm sort of creating just a space sort of a off of Facebook that is, just a safe community for women who listen to the podcast to come and talk about our ADHD. And so we do Zooms each month, and I'm trying to think of like have bringing in experts who can have topics if that's ever something you'd be interested in doing, talking to the group.
Absolutely would
Oh.
absolutely love to. I absolutely love to do anything that you're involved with. I like you so much. I'm not even
I love.
excited about being done with this, and that's my life most of the time. I'm like,
I know, right? No, I love it, right? That's like the other side of the coin too, which is like if I don't like somebody, they know, but I'm like when I like you, I'm just like,
I
hi.
know I probably like you too much, and I need to like pull
I
back.
know, right? I am always like, I'm a little much too, but no, I really, really enjoyed talking with you. So, any excuse to have another conversation again, we'll be in. Don't be a stranger. Let's keep in touch.
Okay, no, I love that, and yeah, let's anytime. So if you can have if you have a subject that you're like, oh, I think she'd be great for that. I can give plenty of subjects, but if you have anything that's just like, oh, okay, I think she'd be helpful, with the ladies in this part, I really enjoy, okay, teaching about because it makes such a big difference in people's lives. That emotion soaking piece is such a key element. It helps people so much just to learn about it. Like we hear about the empaths all of the time, but people don't really tap into understanding that empathic ability, which now I'm not going to call it empathic ability because we're dealing with things like autism. They look like the opposite of empaths. So if we don't call it, so I'm like, empaths come along the emotion soaking spectrum, I want to say. So
Hmm.
then that way, those who are taking in all these negative emotions and then, either blowing up or retreating, right? Or kind of running into it, right? No matter what version of it they're doing, you're understanding that that's what's happening so that you can bring a different kind of energy, work on bringing a different internal energy when you're dealing with hypersensitive people so that you can get better results.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we do sort of talk around that a lot. I have a lot of conversations with guests about like feeling so, how much we feel positive and negative and how it could be really positive, because we have that like childlike energy about us, but also, like, yeah, like how rejection sensitive dysphoria, that's like the one thing that people, when people are first learning about their ADHD and then they first hear about RSD and it's like, oh yeah.
That's
Like
what it is.
it's huge. I know, the way in which we ruminate and have kind of that obsessive, we latch onto obsessive negative thoughts. And I mean, yeah, again, it's so fascinating. All of it is so fascinating to me. Yeah, but really like even the term hypersensitive or highly sensitive person has a negative connotation to it, right? Like
Yes.
so, and it's so, it really doesn't need to be. I think it's so much about flipping that script and flipping how you view yourself and your strengths. Yeah.
Yeah, I love to acknowledge that I'm hyper. I love saying hyper. I love calling myself hypersensitive because then it's like, and then I'll always say then I'm a strong emoter. I love saying strong emoter. And then people always laugh and like, and it's it's a blessing and a curse. is the absolutely most fantastic thing ever and the most terrible thing sometimes. And so, but then that's what makes me me, right? And so any aspect that makes me me is most fantastic. We learn how to embrace that.
Oh,
And
I know, right? And just think like if you can instill that in a child and have it really like land and be part of their identity as they mature, it's like the sky's the limit. Oh my God, I know. That's
now
huge.
that's what's happened for my little girl. I'm
Oh.
extremely, well, big girl. She's taller than me now. She is the most confident, quirky little thing ever. And but she knows, she's just like, people when she was younger, they say things like, you're weird or you're this or you're that. So and she would say, I know. Like she would say, I know, thank you. Right? Because this is what now people don't get mad at me out there, but this is something that just how it works in my household. I'm like, we're all little weirdos. Like that's how we started out because my kids are different, right? And I'm different. So I'm like, we're all weirdos. So let's get used to it now. This is our greatness. We're not boring like some of those other people out there. Own it, right? And my kids have completely and totally, like, they own it. They're like, yep, yep, yeah, I'm weird, yep. Yep, thank you. I don't want to be like you. Plain is boring.
I know, right? I love it. My daughter is 14 and it's very similar. I mean, I raised her, she has so much confidence and doesn't care about all of the stupid little things that I cared about growing up. And I'm so proud of her because she's so strong. But I do know, like, as her mother, I sometimes worry that she, because we're so programmed to be likable, right? And we're so programmed to be small and to be meek. And so sometimes I'm like, I've created a monster and I get worried because I'm like, you need to take it down a notch. Like I hear that, I don't obviously say it, but it's, I notice in myself that resistance as a mother where I'm like, oh no, you're going to get in trouble, you're not going to be likable, all the ways in which we as women internalize those messages. And I'm like, have to really, like, it's like a full-time job pushing those thoughts out of my mind as a mother. So
Yes, yes. No, I mean, well, if you raise a confident little girl first and foremost, most of our little girls they don't get a chance to have that, to grow up, confident, whether, like I said, different or not, right? And so you've done a most fantastic job with that. Yeah, each time that those thoughts try to come up and bug you, what if she's too much? Then you just your counter thoughts. Now think about it in this way. Sometimes those thoughts will try to come in. Imagine that another person was coming to you saying that to you about your daughter. And then you can easily, when you put form to some of these thoughts, you can easily kick them out. Like, because you give the other person something to hear.
yeah, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
amazing
Okay.
what our thoughts try to do, but yeah.
Well,
But
thanks
yeah.
again. And thank you for your flexibility today. I appreciated
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, no worries, no worries. No, I live in the world of flexibility. If seriously, if I weren't flexible with others, then that would mean that I'm not flexible with myself, which would make life much worse for me.
I love that. That's great.
Just remember, in the future, if anybody lacks flexibility, it's more about them than you. So there you go.
Yes, right? Right?
You don't
Repeat after
care.
me. I am not the problem. Yes.
I am not the problem. If they have a problem with flexibility, that was already their problem before I got here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.